Hello and welcome back to Future You, the podcast brought to you by graduate careers experts Prospects. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and in this episode, I chat to Beth about being a photographer.
Okay, my name's Beth Moseley and I am a photographer and I run my own business.
Amazing. So how long have you been a photographer?
I was thinking about this and I think I started my business in 2011. So yeah, it will be 14 years.
Wow,
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah. So let's go right back to the beginning. What does your educational journey look like?
Right, so I come from quite an academic background. So I'm one of four. And my dad was a university professor and all my siblings were academic and went to university. And I am not. I'm dyslexic. So while they kind of flew through A-levels and GCSEs, I got to GCSEs and realised I didn't want to go any further at that point. So I went off and joined college because I also didn't want to not do anything and did an NVQ in catering because I just loved cooking. So I did something that I was passionate about, but didn't really know it would end up in a career. Had a really good time, learned a lot, and it gave me the opportunity to study, or not study, but work abroad for a year and a half. So that opened up that door, and I lived in America and worked in beach clubs and golf clubs. So that was incredible. But I did it enough to realise that I didn't want to have it as a career. So when I came back from America, I was like, I'd like to study photography. So I did a BTEC in photography at Brighton College. That was 2 years. And that was the days where it wasn't digital, but film cameras. So I spent a lot of time in the dark room and learning about, how to use a camera and how to tell a story and how to communicate a message. And that was really interesting. And then that, I'm just trying to think, that took me on to university. So unfortunately, I've later realised you don't necessarily have to do a degree to be a photographer. It was the path that my siblings all did. So it kind of seemed like a natural progression. So I went to university and did photography at Nottingham Trent University, which was a really good experience because at university, not only do you learn the subject, there's loads of opportunities to do extra career building activities if you're proactive, which I was because I was joining university a couple of years older than everybody else. So I was on the committee to organise the end of year degree show, and I was the chair of that, and did loads of extra stuff that kind of added to my CV and gave me an opportunity to kind of really explore where my skills were. Um, and the other thing about the degree was it gave me my second year in Prague in the Czech Republic. So it was through the Erasmus scheme. So first year was in Nottingham, second year in Prague, and third year back in Nottingham. And that second year was really important because it gave me an experience of living in a different country again and learning a very different style of photography because in the Czech Republic, it was more black and white, very documentary based. They took it incredibly seriously, which was lovely. Whereas my experience of university in photography, it was all about the partying and the social scene, and the actual degree was maybe secondary. Whereas in Prague, FAMU, which was the university's name, it was really, everyone took it really earnestly, and that was really refreshing to see. But once graduating, I realised maybe I couldn't. No, not that I realised I couldn't be a photographer or didn't want to be one, but I couldn't foresee how I could carve out a career. So at university, they taught me maybe the skills of how to take a photograph, but not necessarily what to do next. And that, I think, was a real shortfalling of the course. And I think hopefully they've improved it since, but I think that's what universities did at the time, which I think is very unhelpful. So I left university and worked in arts and health for a while.
What's arts and health?
Arts and health. So the charity I worked for was called Paintings and Hospitals. So we lent out, it was like a library scheme of amazing artwork. So we had this incredible art collection by Royal Academy artists and like really incredible artists. And we'd loan them out to hospitals and surgeries. So when you're sitting in the waiting room, you get to enjoy this lovely artwork. And then the other job was working as an art and education coordinator for a housing association. So doing arts activities from people aged 16 to over 100. So that was really fascinating, really varied.
Yeah, absolutely. So then did you wake up one day and just decide, right, now I'm going to start my own business?
No, so my last job, which I had when I was working in London as in the arts and health sector was at this housing association, and it was just maternity cover. And it kind of coincided with me realizing I didn't want to live in London anymore. Did my maternity cover came to an end, and although they offered to make me permanent, it didn't quite work living in London. So I moved back to Norwich, and it coincided with a recession. And so working in the field of arts and health is really kind of finding those jobs, particularly in Norwich, is really rare. And then mix in a recession when those jobs are the ones that really kind of get all the funding gets cut. So I was like, I know, I'll become a photographer, I'll start my own business. So it was really by chance
Yeah.
and like a happy accident, really.
Okay. So, do you specialize in certain types of photography? Are you an all-rounder? Do you only do weddings? Only do actors' headshots? What kind of style of photographer are you?
I describe it as people-based photography. So I've realised I cannot shoot a landscape, and I find product photography really difficult because I've got nothing to engage in. But I love photographing people. So when I started off, it was weddings because it's quite an easy formula once you get the hang of it, both in terms of managing clients, attracting a business, and also photographing the day. And they're really well paid. Um, and then now over the years, I've kind of evolved to more kind of business headshots, portraits, photographing, kind of social media content, and a little bit of family photography.
Oh, lovely.
Mm.
So, what does a typical working day look like for you?
So it's mainly desk based. So I think the misconception with being a photographer is that you're going to be out there taking photographs all the time. But unfortunately, probably only 10% of your time is taking photographs, and the rest is managing a business. So I could be responding to inquiries, writing a blog post, updating my website, doing social media. So trying to attract new business, attending networking events, talking to potential clients. So just the nuts and bolts of keeping the business going.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so half the job is, well, a third of the job is all the admin, a third of the job is taking the photograph, and then the last third is editing and delivering them. So I've got quicker over time, and I use things like Light Blue, and then AI has got involved, and that's very useful and sped things up. So yeah, it's kind of little bit of everything.
So, what's been the most challenging part of building your photography business?
For me, it's been just learning the mechanics of running a business, running a good business, and providing a service that you're proud of. So that just takes time, and it's learning as you go, really, trial and error. Luckily, I find the business side really interesting, but you've got to attend those workshops which explain how to do something, and you've got to put the time in really into learning the stages that you need to go through in order to successfully run a business, because I wasn't taught at a university. So, and you don't necessarily know what you need to know when you start your business, which is partly a blessing, I think, because I think a big dollop of naivety is very helpful when you launch a business, because I think maybe if you knew everything, it would be a bit overwhelming. So I guess it's just been figuring out what I need to know and then figuring out how I learn it. Like, where
Yeah.
do I ask? Where do I get the knowledge from? And then, particularly at the very beginning, is getting the initial money coming in. So you need a bit of a cash flow, so you can do the workshops, you can buy the equipment, just to kind of get you started.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what kind of skill sets do you need to pursue this?
I think particularly with people sort of like based photography, you need to be a really good people person. Because I think a big part of my job when I'm taking photographs is making people feel at ease. I don't think I've really had anybody, maybe one, two people that have approached me have ever said, "Oh, I love being photographed." Everybody's like, "Oh, being in front of the camera is just so cringy." And so my job and why people I think pick me is because I can help them feel relaxed and get them in the zone, and then you get the best out of them. I've learned over the years, when people approach me to potentially book me, like, always make sure you have a chat with them in advance. If you find that you don't click, then it's best to say, I think you need to find another photographer and no offense will be taken, because if they don't feel comfortable with me, they're not going to feel comfortable on the day, whether it's portrait, wedding day, or in business photographs. So connecting with your photographer is huge, and then they'll feel themselves.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to enter the industry?
Just keep knocking on doors, asking people out for a cup of coffee, pick their brains. In terms of the actual photography element side, just keep using your camera, but try and find a practical project to practice on. So whether it's second shooting for someone, if you're interested in weddings, and say, I'll do it for free for a few times. So you've got like a real life experience to practice, or get some friends and ask to photograph their family. Because when you photograph anything, any subject, is not just being good at knowing how to use your camera. You need to know how to manage people, and you also need to think about lighting and like where the light's falling and is it dark, how to use the flash. And so you've got to think really quickly to be able to keep your subjects interested and connected, but also technically make the best photograph. But I think ultimately, if you're a good people person, that will get you really far.
Hmm. So do you have your own studio, or do you have like portable equipment that you can go and set up in places?
So I personally have portable equipment. So many people do have a studio, but I think as the world's kind of developing, studio photography's become less popular, and actually people prefer more kind of out and about natural photography. So I could set up a studio if I needed to in someone's sitting room, but really I have two cameras and I go with a portable flash, and we kind of have pre-chosen a location, whether at home or at the beach or in their office, and I kind of photograph kind of in a location that the client kind of enjoys, feels comfortable in.
Yeah, oh, amazing. So obviously you do this for the love of it,
Yeah.
but you also have to make money. So how do you decide on prices and how do you dictate your own
Oh,
salary?
yeah. It's been a slow progression, and I think although I love running a business and I consider myself quite kind of business savvy, pricing yourself can be quite, what's the word? Just quite nerve-wracking, because I guess it's a confident thing is linked to pricing. And to begin with, when I did start the business, I subsidized my salary by working part-time in a gallery. So I was able to kind of price quite sort of more affordably while I learnt my craft and built up a network. And then as soon as I didn't have that gallery job, there was something actually really good about realizing this is my only income. And there's nothing like a bit of fear that makes you really price yourself more appropriately. But also, I mean, every sector has a different way of pricing. But with the wedding world, when I did that, particularly at the beginning, what's lovely, particularly about that sector, is there's a really lovely community, particularly in, well, actually all around England. And so it's just talking to other photographers and understanding how they price and where you fit, whether you're like, whether you want to be an affordable photographer and offer, you can design it depending on what type of client you're trying to attract. So I aim for like the mid client, that doesn't have a huge budget but is willing to spend a little bit of money, and so kind of that's who I later identified as who I wanted to attract, and so I priced accordingly. But obviously you also need to bear in mind the nuts and bolts of running a business, how you want to, what you need to pay yourself. So lots of spreadsheets were involved, figuring out the cost of running a business. So how much I had to pay to hire my desk, what I need to pay my mortgage, my bills, spending money, how much I needed to invest in my equipment, and then what profit I wanted to make on top of that. And that guided me to the figure. And then it also gave me an indication of how many jobs I wanted to do per month or needed to do per month as well.
What happens if you don't hit that target?
So how I like to do it is there's 12 months in a year, and I count December and January as being kind of a month not to count on because of Christmas. Everyone's distracted, but people don't tend to book photography so much in those months. So I calculate how much I need to earn over 10 months, and then over, what's the word? Make my target bigger than I might need to do. And it's an average. So you have a target per month, and then you just keep an eye on it per month. And some months you'll do better than your target, and some months you'll do less. But overall, it does tend to average out, and that does come from experience. You start seeing the patterns, and that's
Yeah.
what's nice about experience. So you get a bit scared one month because you're not brought in as much, but then you look back and you're like, well, that's okay. You keep putting the effort in, more money will come in the following months. But you just have to keep tapping away. Don't rest on your laurels, as the phrase says.
Any myths about photography that you would like to debunk?
Well, I think the main one is what I started off with, is that the photography's actually a small part of what you used to do. And the other thing, again, I've also touched on, but actually it's a lovely community. And I really do feel it's community over competition, and that's something that I really try to live by. And, I have lots of friends who are photographers in Norfolk, and we often go and pitch for the same job, but we never badmouth each other. We never kind of dismiss each other's work. It's like, well, maybe the best person for that particular job kind of get it, because your clients choose you based on how you edit your pictures and your style, the price, and the individual. So sometimes you don't meet one of those points, but not take it personally. But, I'm really fortunate with, I think, the photography world. It's
Yeah.
I've learned so much from other people.
Mm. Oh, that's lovely. And what do you wish you'd first known when you started?
So I was trying to think about this on the way here, and it's a really difficult one because, in a way, actually, the naivety that I entered starting my business with really helped me by not knowing everything. And sometimes you need to have mistakes in order to learn from them. And I did have some real humdingers at the beginning, which I would rather not repeat. But actually, as an optimist, I managed to get a lot from them and
Ah,
learn a lot from mistakes. So I think really mistakes are good. Not that I'm touching wood now. Not that I want to have mistakes, but it really makes you tighten up your workflow and the whole working process. I once had an incident where I photographed a bride and groom, and it was it was a bad match. They shouldn't have picked me as their photographer. What they wanted from their photography wasn't what I was able to give them.
right.
And it was as at the beginning of my career, and they were unhappy with the images. And I look back a few years later, actually, once the emotion had died down, and I was like, actually, they're not bad images. What went wrong is I didn't clearly explain what I was able to provide them. And so there was a lot of assumptions involved, both from
Right.
both sides. And so learning from that, having kind of resolved the situation, I tightened up my contract and made it really clear what to expect. Always made sure I met with people in advance, ran through what to expect, and made sure that everyone was just really aware of what I was able to offer. And so there was no misunderstandings. And so that has actually been a really positive mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to mention?
I think, well, something that's recently happened to me that's been a really positive. So, one great thing I think, about running your own business and why I love running my own business is that you're in charge of your destiny. So, I looked recently at a job advertised at the local art university. I was like, oh, that looked interesting. And I was looking at the salary and I was looking at the hours and I was looking at what they expected. I was like, hang on a moment, I get paid more. My time is incredibly flexible. Particularly now I have a child, I can pick him up from school and work around it. And I make the decisions. Why would I want to go and work for someone else? So it really reinforced that I have made the right decision. I run my own business. But what you have to be aware of, or what I have been aware of, is that now I've run the business for 14 years, is to keep it exciting, is you also have to keep evolving. So whereas if you're in employment, you might change jobs every 4 years just to keep that excitement and career development. I don't want to kind of stop Beth Moseley photography, but I need to keep it kind of juicy for me. So I started off as a wedding photographer, and now I'm moving more into working with businesses and business owners, while still doing a little bit of wedding photography. And that's made it really exciting. Like, it's a very different way of advertising because it's a different type of clientele, and they've got different needs and different expectations. So it's trying to figure out how I evolve my business to get that new audience. And I've really enjoyed the challenge, really. It's a bit like starting a whole new business over again. Otherwise, I kind of feel like if you just do the same, well, for me anyway, you do the same thing over, it's a bit of a waste opportunity. And I want to enjoy work. I want to get up and love what I do. And so keeping it fresh has enabled me to do that. And it's also now I'm a parent, it's been incredibly flexible, which has been, a lifesaver, really.
Amazing. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time
No
today.
probs. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Beth for their time. For more information on becoming a photographer, you can head to prospects.ac.uk or check out the links in the show notes below. For a full-length video version of this episode, check out our YouTube channel at Future You Pod. If you enjoyed the episode, do feel free to leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. Otherwise, thank you as always for listening, and good luck on your journey to future you.